People ask me all the time, how do you provide certainty for people when the external world no longer offers certainty? There is no external certainty. So when those jobs are disrupted, what will people hang on to? The answer is...
One of the most famous people on the planet, Tony Robbins.
The great Tony Robbins is here, my man.
There's nothing that people want that they can't make happen if they really want it, the heart and soul, that they want to do something about it.
This kind of change hitting society isn't just a threat about unemployment. It's a threat about a nervous system shock.
AI is the call. New technology is the call for us to become more. Again, to move from survival to spirit, to move from settling to something greater.
AI is going to create this rate of change that is just beyond belief, and it doesn't correlate with happiness necessarily. It needs to be turned into happiness.
Tony, you've been coaching millions of people over decades, right? After kind of looking back over that time, are you more optimistic about the world or less?
Here's what I think about optimism. I think...
Now that's a moonshot, ladies and gentlemen.
Everybody, welcome to Moonshots. I'm here today with a dear friend, the world's #1 life and business coach, Tony Robbins. He's coached more than 100 million people across 195 countries. Beyond his coaching, he's the owner of in more than 114 companies with $12 billion in business. He is an investor in private equity across 80 private equity companies with $11 billion AUM. He's advised presidents, Fortune 500 CEOs, global leaders on leadership and human potential. Personally, Tony is one of my best friends. We've co-authored a #1 New York Times selling book. We've co-founded 2 companies, Fountain Life and Life Force. And in my opinion, he is one of the greatest humanitarians on the planet alive today. Tony, welcome, pal.
Thanks, buddy. It's great to be with you.
Yeah, for sure. You know, I remember a decade ago, we started a conversation, and we started too early, but a conversation about what we saw as the age of coming technological socialism,
Yes.
where technology, not the government, but technology would start to take care of individuals, and the implications that that might have on our psychology, on our sense of safety, on how we motivate ourselves. And as you know, I did a podcast recently with Elon, and during that conversation, he said a few things that I wanted. The first person I wanted to speak to about this was you. You know, he said literally that he expects in the next 3 to 5 years that AI and robotics would fundamentally displace all human labor. And I think the time frame that folks have been talking about in the media, in government, across the board, has been more of a 20-year adaptation cycle of how long that would take. And humans are amazingly adaptable, but I don't think at that speed. I think, you know, this kind of change hitting society isn't just a threat about unemployment. It's a threat about a nervous system shock.
Yeah.
So let's start there. How do you respond to that? What are your concerns?
Well, when the environment changes faster than our ability to adapt, people panic. When people panic, they have a variety of emotional reactions, including anger and rage and sometimes violence. And if you look at the history of change, you can go back all the way to Luddites, you know, if you remember studying your history in the 1800s in England, and they created these machines that displaced about 70% of the jobs. And what did people do? They rioted. You know, you had thousands of people. You had them attacking with hammers to destroy these machines. You had them blowing up facilities, you know, factories. You had factory people, owners being shot and being threatened to be killed. You had factory owners putting people out there shooting people. The government in England passed a law in the first year of this kind of 5-year cycle, basically, saying that if you destroyed a machine, it was capital punishment. They hung 24 people publicly to try to stop this. They put out 12,000 people to fight them. This is during the same with the use from the Napoleon Wars. There's no guarantee of this being a smooth transition. Now, I'm not a reactionary person, and when you hear 3 to 5 years, it gets your attention. And you know, Elon's one of the smartest people alive, and people can argue about the timeline. But Ray Kurzweil, a mutual friend of both of ours, you know, he's been talking about 2029 for probably 20 years, and he's been the most accurate forecaster I know. Even if you go to Hinton, who's the founder of AI himself, he has a longer version. He goes 2030, 2040. So I'd say 3 to 10 years is my guess. But, I don't think all business will be gone or changed at that time period. But the question really is, how do you provide certainty for people, right? And people ask me all the time, how do you provide certainty for people when the external world no longer offers certainty? And I would argue that you don't have to deal with it at all because it's already true. What I mean is there is no external certainty. External certainty is a total illusion. You have rented certainty because you have a certain business or you have a certain category, you have a certain income, you have certain relationships. But a COVID, for example, instantly changed all of that overnight for people. You walk across the street and get hit by a car and, you can't walk for 6 months or forever. Things like this have always been a part of our lives. So I think it's really dispelling the illusion of certainty and finding people and the ability to get that internal certainty. Look, neuroscience is teaching us that, same as AI, our brains are predictive machines. It's constantly trying to predict what's going to happen and close the gap between what it predicts and what reality is. And when it doesn't match up, that's when that craziness, that anger, that fear shows up. So it's going to show up on a large scale. And our job, I think, as leaders, is to anticipate that, to look at history, because it's not just the Luddites. You can say 15 years later that happened with the thrashers, another machine that was used, to get rid of wheat. And they had the same reaction 15 years later. In the 1930s, 30, 31, 32, communism came and people had to be put down. Governments in the past have overreacted to this to try to stop it. It's been a very difficult stage. So if we're going to make the transition, I think we have to anticipate what's coming. And I remember I talked to President Obama about this 10 years ago. And right at the end of his office, and I was saying, what are you going to do? Because I gave the example. I said, you inherited an economy where, 8 million jobs disappeared, right, in 2008. And the world economy was smashed up. Well, I said, look at this. These self-driving cars, they're going to be around at least sometime in the next 10 to 15 years. And they're going to displace truck drivers, and they're going to displace, anybody that's driving an Uber. Who's going to hire a truck driver that can work 8 hours a day maximum? They cost a lot of money for their health insurance. It's always going up. They complain when you can have, a truck that drives 24 hours a day, probably cheaper insurance, doesn't make the mistakes, don't have to pay the health care, and you can depreciate the asset. So I said, if you just take that category alone, those truck drivers, Uber drivers, taxi drivers, that's 8 million jobs. And I said, so what are you guys doing, at the governmental level to anticipate this, to retool people? And I'll never forget, he goes, Tony, it's not going to happen that fast. And I said, well, with all due respect, Mr. President, if you look at history, we could say 150 years ago, 80% of us were farmers. Now it's 3% we feed the world. No one thought of a new job called being a webmaster, or these days, you do something different like AI master, whatever the case may be. Those jobs weren't even thought of. So I know there'll be new jobs, but that was a 150-year shift. The speed of this is the challenge. Yeah. And he said, Tony, all the people we're talking to, it's just not going to happen that fast. And I'm thinking about it just the other day because it's just 10 years ago. And you and I both know between Waymo and obviously Elon, it's happening in cities all across the world. It's not the standard yet, but will it be sometime soon? The answer is yes. So when those jobs are disrupted, what will people hang on to? The answer is we have to give them two things. First, help them develop an identity as a creator. Here's what I mean by that. Most people that you talk to in daily life are stressed. It is the number. I'm so stressed. There's so much. I don't know what to do. I'm so stressed about that. So much about mental health these days. Are you really going to tell me that life is more stressful today than when, you had a fight for your food with a tiger? I mean, it's absurd. Or during the Middle Ages where, you might catch something where, entire community went down. But we think it's more stressful because we're managers today. We try to manage so much. We were not made to manage our circumstances. We're made to create. When you're managing circumstances, you don't feel any sense of agency. You don't feel like you're in charge. And most human stress comes from the fact that you feel events are controlling you versus you're controlling events. So think about it. Something created us. You can call it God, you can call it the universe, you can call it whatever you want to call it. But we were created by something, and we're given the ability to create. When you become a creator of life on your terms, it doesn't matter what changes in the outside world. Now, there's one other piece. You might say practically, like what skills would somebody need to be able to do well? Because I've been thinking, and I've got, just like you, I've got kids. I got 5 kids and 5 grandkids now. I have a, 52-year-old daughter, and thanks to COVID, I have a 4-year-old daughter. COVID was good to me. But I think about my grandkids and my younger kids, and I say, man, 80%, 50%, 30%, depending on which studies you read, of traditional jobs are going to disappear. Elon's saying all of them. But no matter how you slice it, the world's going to change radically. How do I arm them right? Not just with money or resources. How to arm them to have self-esteem, to know they can play the game. And the answer is developing an identity that says, I'm the kind of person that always finds the way. I'm the person that can find meaning in anything and empowering meaning. I know how to use my body to produce certainty, not try to get it from the outside world, which is an illusion. I have an identity. I'm the person that makes it happen. If you think about like Lance Armstrong's identity of like, I'm the guy that always finds the way to victory. Well, we was told he had cancer in his lungs, in his brain, and in his testicles. Most people would say, I'm out. He's like, I'm going to find the answer. He did. Now, the same belief system of identity made him use drugs to compete. That kind of hurt his career and his identity in some way. But identity is what controls it. Then there's the skill. And I'll finish with this. There's 3 skills I teach every one of my kids, anybody I'm in business with, anybody in a relationship with, to continuously master. If you master these 3 skills, it doesn't matter what happens with AI. It doesn't matter. You'll still be a part of what wins. Because in the end, you're not going to be replaced by AI. You're going to be replaced by someone who knows how to use AI. And here's the bottom line. Pattern 1, the skill number 1 is pattern recognition. You're a genius at this. You and I have been friends for decades. I'm not blowing smoke. You and I both are damn good at recognizing patterns early on and seeing what they mean. Now, when you recognize a pattern, it eliminates fear. People are fearful because something looks like this has never happened before. There's nothing like this. There's always something like this. You know, history's not the same, but it rhymes. You know, the phrase we hear so often. So it's like once you recognize the pattern in yourself, emotionally or physically, or the pattern financially, or the pattern of cycles of markets, you're no longer fearful. But the second skill is pattern utilization. Now think about it. What changed humanity from living in fear and running from one place to another, you know, being hunter-gatherers, trying to hopefully get our food, to staying in one place and being able to build a family, a community, a city, a nation? One pattern recognition that we learned to use, and that is the seasons. Until we understood the seasons, you could do the right thing at the wrong time, and you had nothing. Planting in the winter, no matter how hard you work, doesn't work. So once we learn that, wow, we can plant here, we protect during the hot summer, we reap and keep some of it for the winter. That's how we came to be able to be where we are. Well, once you recognize financial patterns, business patterns, patterns of technology, you're not fearful. Once you start to use those patterns, you become powerful. You now start to be able to invest better. You'll be able to build a business. You'll be able to have a more mature relationship and one that's more passionate, more alive, and more loving. But the third target that all my kids, I want them to move towards and constantly reinforcing is pattern creation. So think of it this way, and I'll finish with this. If you're learning to play music, the piano, usually someone else before you has come up with a pattern that's delightful, enhancing, whatever you want to call it, beautiful. You learn their pattern. And you learn a lot of their patterns. And you don't just recognize it, you use it, you can produce the result that's amazing. But as time goes by, suddenly there'll be a point where you've played enough of other people's patterns that you come through. And now you become a creator of patterns. And if you do that in business or in sports, you become the GOAT of that industry. You become the greatest of all time because you're bringing something to the table that's never been there before. So the answer, long answer, but I think it needs context, is the need for certainty is in human beings, but that need can be met many different ways. And in order to have them succeed, they need to have a different identity. They have to understand that this idea of certainty, just things being the same way, has never really been there, if you look at it in reality. But I can do internal certainty. I can find the meaning. I can develop the identity of the person that finds the way. I can develop the identity of being a creator. And if I study these 3 skill sets, I'll always be able to learn, and as I learn, I'll be able to master anything life brings me, including AI, technology, robotics, nanotechnology, etc.
Hey everybody, you may not know this, but I've got an incredible research team. And every week, myself and my research team study the meta trends that are impacting the world. Topics like computation, sensors, networks, AI, robotics, 3D printing, synthetic biology. And these meta trend reports I put out once a week enable you to see the future 10 years ahead of anybody else. If you'd like to get access to the Metatrends newsletter every week, go to Diamandis.com/Metatrends. That's Diamandis.com/Metatrends. I appreciate this. And I agree with you, of course. The challenge is how many people have it within themselves to actually, go down that road. One of the challenges is we're living in a world where there have been a number of social contracts that have become, sort of codified in all of our lives. Work hard in school, go to good college, get a degree, get a great job, and all of a sudden that gets just disrupted. And people find themselves where their identity for all time has been their job. I mean, first off, the idea of work is a rather recent invention. You know, we never used to work 10, 20,000 years ago. We survived. I love Sadhguru has a great quote about this. I remember he said, technology is the means by which we take a vacation from survival. I love that.
That's great.
And so the question now is when your self-worth has been tied to your job and all of a sudden either, you know, it's taken away or it's minimized. And then we also have, I think one of the biggest concerns I have, and Elon echoed this, is we're going to have a large population of individuals not getting jobs. I mean, they're in the process of the social contract of, I've, you know, worked hard, I got to a college, and we're seeing this at MIT, at Northeastern, at universities around, with great degrees, I cannot get a job. And retooling themselves to go and become a creator. And one of the things we've talked on the Moonshots podcast a lot is that the real future career, the real future opportunity is being an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurship is the future for everybody at some shape, and call it a creator, call it whatever you like. So how do people make that shift when they're in the midst of hurting? And we're not there yet. You know, another thing that Elon said that I want to just say is, you know, we're going to head towards universal high income, where, you know, robots and AI enable us to have anything we want. And at the same time with social unrest. So how do you think about social unrest coming? Is it avoidable? Can we immunize ourselves? Do you think government's going to take the actions required?
Yeah, those are great questions, and I'm certainly not the expert to answer them. I can only give you my 2 cents in my opinion. But I've heard a lot of people say this before, like, you know, they say for 4,000 years our identity's been tied to work. What happens when we don't have to work anymore? And it's just not true for 4,000 years. Before the agrarian transformation of our society, as you said, we're into survival, but really what we were tied to was a tribe. We were tied to connection and contribution. Sure. Those are 2 human needs that have never gone away and are not going to go away if there's no, quote, work. Now, I don't know if I buy there'll be no work for human beings personally. I could be dead wrong, but I don't buy that necessary future, certainly not in the next 3-5 years that you're describing. But I think you got to think about economic utility wasn't it. You had your sense of significance. Let's talk about something for 2 seconds, because you know this, but share it with your audience. You know, I work with people all over the earth. One of the things that I uncovered about 20 years ago that just really changed my work, where I could help people in a radically different way, is I noticed, you know, I've worked in, you know, 139 countries. I've got clients in 193 countries. But I've gone to those countries and worked. And every country has its own values and rule systems, obviously. Generally, for example, if you go to the East, saving face is very, very important, as you well know. There's cultures like the United States where the individual is more valued. There's cultures where it's more about the group. But the one thing I noticed in every single culture was the same problems occurred even though the culture was different. And that made me dig to see what drives people underneath it all. What are the drives that aren't just motivational? What are the drives that are built into all human beings? And I finally discovered what I consider to be the 6 human needs that drive everything. In other words, whatever people do, they have a reason. If somebody says they're going to commit suicide, they've got a reason. If someone's willing to run in a building and save someone and they might lose their life to do it, they got a reason. If somebody just yells at you, they got a reason. They might not know what it is consciously, but there's a million reasons. There's 6 needs that drive those reasons or those stories, right? Someone's going to kill themselves. Obviously, they have to have a belief that dying is less painful than living, as an example. So those 6 needs come down to these real fast, because I think...
And let's take these one at a time, because AI impacts all of them.
They do. It does. But let's just look at what they are. So the first basic human need is certainty. The need to be able to be comfortable, to avoid pain. Now, this need for certainty is in every human being. It's just the differences in human beings in these 6 needs are that some people value certainty, number 1, and some will value, let's say, uncertainty, another need, much higher. Where you value these 6 needs is why we make different decisions. And the second thing is, how do you get certainty? Some people get certainty by lowering their expectations. Some people get certainty by trusting in God and saying there's a higher purpose, I'm going to be guided. Some people get certainty by saying, I've been through hell before, I've always found the answer, I'll find the answer here. Some people get certainty by working out and feeling that certainty in their body. So we all have different rules, a different map about how to meet that need. So the two differences is, what do you value towards the top two? That's what drives you. And what are your rules about how to meet them? So having said that, you can get certainty by eating a lot of food. You're all stressed out, eat a lot of food, and your stomach fills up and you start to breathe better, right? Because you're full. Or you smoke a cigarette, take a breath in and blow it out nice and slow, and you feel better. You're killing yourself, but you feel comfortable while you're doing it, right? It's just provides certainty. So you can find certainty in positive ways, neutral ways, or negative ways. But if you were certain every moment of your life, you know what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, what someone's going to do, what they're going to say, in the beginning, that'd feel great. But after a while, you'd be bored out of your mind, which is why the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, gave us a second need, which is uncertainty. We have a need for uncertainty. We have a need for surprise. In fact, when I do large audiences, I'll say to a stadium, how many love surprise? And 15,000 people all raise their hand. And I go, bullshit. I said, you like the surprises you want, right? The surprises you don't want, you call problems. But we need those. It triggers a different response in us. We need that, a need for variety. Now, if there's too much variety, people freak out. If there's too much certainty, they're bored out of their mind. So is the goal to be the lukewarm middle? No, the goal is you can meet through multiple beliefs or actions or emotions, you can meet multiple needs. If someone's ever rented a movie that they've already seen, I'll ask people that. Most people say they have, and I say, get a life, right? And I said, but I've done it too. Why would you rent a movie you've already seen? Because you're certain it's good and you're hoping it's been long enough, you've forgotten enough, it still gives you variety to watch it again, right? And so you can meet multiple needs. The third need is the need for significance, the need to feel unique, to feel special, to feel important. This is one of the most important human needs. They're all important. Some people value significance, number one. Some people value certainty, number one. So they live a very different life, right? If you're valuing certainty, number one, you're going to be holding back a little bit back here. If it's uncertainty, you're going to be charging forward, right? The direction of your life is driven by which of these needs you value at the top. Significance means to feel needed, to feel important, to feel significant, right? You can get significance by working harder than anybody else, being more generous. You can get significance by beating up on somebody, right? Verbally tearing somebody down. You have the illusion if they go down, you go up. Right? There's so many ways to do it that are positive and negative. The reason we have violence is if somebody doesn't feel significant and you're in that part of town where maybe they're not feel like they're part of our society or taken care of or have the same options, somebody puts a gun at your head. Well, how certain are they you're going to respond? 0 to 10? 10. How much variety is every time it's different? And thirdly, you're the most significant thing in their life. I bring this up because this is a critical principle. I know I'm teaching a lot real quick, but you'll see why it's important in understanding how technology and AI affects us and the changes we're talking about. If you are in a position that you meet at least 3 of your needs through a belief, or 3 of your needs by an emotional pattern, or 3 of your needs by an action, you'll become addicted to that belief, that emotion, or that action. Whether it's a positive thing or a negative addiction, you'll be addicted to it. And by the way, unfortunately, violence has always been with us and will be unless there's a consciousness change, because it's one of the fastest ways to feel significant and certain and have variety. It also meets the 4th need, unfortunately, which is connection and love. Not the love part, but the connection part. Everyone needs connection and love, right? We, as human beings, if you're born, you know, as a doctor in your background, I know rocket science doctor, but you also know as a medical doctor, that if children are not physically held as babies, if they're not having that kinesthetic touch, they get failure to thrive syndrome. Literally, they can die from the lack of that. So we need that connection. Now, most people had love and maybe it disappeared or it ended, and so they settle for the crumbs of connection, but they still want that. So you can get connection through, having problems and sharing your problems with someone else. You can have that connection by, prayer. You can have connection by going for a run and feeling connected to God or the universe. You can feel that connection by buying a dog because, cats leave, but dogs, you leave for 2 minutes. It's like you've been gone for 6 months. They're so happy to see you, right? So there's many ways, right, to get that sense of connection. By the way, have you ever seen 2 people fight over whose problem's bigger? I have this problem. I have this problem. They're not fighting over the problems. They're fighting over who's got a more significant problem. Mine's
Sure.
more significant, right? So
It's like when you and I battle over who's been traveling too much.
That's exactly right. So the first four needs are the needs of the personality. Everyone needs certainty. And if you have to lie to yourself, you'll do it. If you have to work 20 hours a day, you'll do it. People find a way to get certainty. Now, 0 to 10, they might get 5, 6, 7, I don't know. And they might get it in a way that's temporary. If you take a bunch of sugar, you're going to get a nice sugar high, but it's going to drop. It doesn't last. Most people meet their needs in a way that is temporary, right? But certainty, uncertainty, those two you can see how they feel like contrasted. Significance, I want to be the one, but then I want to be connected. So you can see the kind of conflicts that most people find in these first four. But the ultimate needs are our spiritual needs, not religious, but spiritual. And that is everything in life has to grow. Everything grows or it dies. That's not my law. It's the law of the universe. And everything in the universe, if it doesn't contribute, it's eventually eliminated, right? So we have to contribute. We have to give something. When we contribute, have something to give. And that's when you have a spiritual high. That's when people feel fulfilled as opposed to for survival. So I say this because to talk about someone losing their job or their sense of identity or their self-worth because they're not doing it through their work anymore, or let's assume that there's no need for work. Let's take this utopian view. I would be concerned about that if I thought the only way we could meet our needs for significance and certainty would be through work. But look, we've already lived a post-work world to some extent if you go back in our history as humans, right? When you were not evaluated by your economic utility, your quote, your job, we always ask, what do you do in America, for example? But that's not what's happening then. You were evaluated by, let's say, your courage in war, by your creativity, by your wisdom, right? By the things that you could share, your art or your music or your ability to tell stories. So there are many ways to meet our needs. Right now, we have been driven to think of it only in one predictive way for the last couple hundred years, but we've done it before and we can do it again. But the answer to your question is, will we as a society do that quick enough? Will everybody make that happen quick enough? I'm afraid to say the answer is no, in my opinion, just because right now you have the carrot and the stick that's driving this technology, especially AI and nanotechnology right behind it and everything else. The carrot is I can make trillions of dollars. And the stick is if we don't do this, China could dominate the world.
Yep.
So as a result of that, almost no money is spent on safety, and there's almost no thinking about what's doing the jobs. You know, right now, we're already seeing high school students are having greater in job employment than college students for the first time. So that never happened before in modern history. And that's happening because people are leaving and those middle jobs have disappeared. Those first stage jobs have already disappeared. Are we doing anything about it? The answer right now is no. So is it concerning to me? Yes. My biggest concern is if you don't have any work, how do you find meaning? I know you can do it. There's many ways to do it, but we have to educate people and we've got to retool them. And just like talking to President Obama, there's very few people actually looking at how to retool our society. And they say, well, to become programmers. You know, they told people go study code. And now, of course, as you know, with Vibe Code, I was just talking to, I think, a mutual friend of ours. I think you know Robert Smith over at Vista.
Yes.
You know, $125 billion private equity firm. And I remember 5 years I talked to him. I said, what's the chokehold on your business? It's getting more people that can write code, right? More software engineers. Right now, they're eliminating them like crazy, right? They only need a few, some really smart ones. So again, you don't lose your job to AI. You lose your job to someone else use AI better than you do. So I think the answer to your question is there is a way to meet all of our needs. It's going to be a call. And I think what AI is doing is it's a spiritual call. I know that's my view of it. We're going from survival values to spiritual values. Yeah. From external focus to more internal focus that we're able to share and make the world better. That's the upside of this. But the transition time is going to be painful. And if you look at history, most of those transitions are a 5-year period, roughly. If you look at every type of major disruption that's happened with technology in the past. I hope it's not like that. I hope conversations like this, like we're having, could be stimulative and other people have them at a high level. And that people like you and I can try to create as much influence with those who have influence to make that shift. But there's no guarantee on it, and I think we have to be realistic to say there's probably going to be some disruption. Look, how many billionaires that you and I both know that they're preppers right now?
Yes.
I mean, I know of a dozen of them that got together. I got invited to this meeting. I didn't go, but I got to hear the details of it. And it's just blowing my mind. I mean, we have mutual friends that are building places underground and giant ranches and hiring giant security and having food stuff.
It's crazy.
So prepping for the future, that's not the answer. The way to prep for the future is prep society by giving the ability to have a different psychology about change and figuring out the ways in which we're going to create that transport.
Tony, I love you for it.
Talk about like taxing robots and so forth might be a part of that.
I love you for this. And by the way, anybody who's not gone to Tony's Date with Destiny, which I've gone to twice, it's an extraordinary experience, and I commend it to everybody. And you'll explore these 6 human needs and understand which of them drive you. And, you know, I'm not questioning whether this transformation can occur. Mm-hmm. I'm concerned that who in society or what institution or what organizations or what leaders are going to lead this. Because I don't see anybody in government addressing this. I see a little bit coming out of the hyperscalers, which are, in fact, going to be the wealthiest, most powerful institutions on the planet, right? This Magnificent Seven right now has got, you know, a revenue equivalent to half the GDP of the United States and more than 99% of the planet. So who's going to take the lead? And, you know, what type of programs need to be in place to change this conversation at the middle school and high school level, right? Because right now, you know, with your young daughter and your older children, it was always, okay, study hard. This is important. You need to contribute to society. You need to learn. You need to do your math tables. All of these things are effectively fading away. And how you contribute, you know, ultimately the conversation, we'll talk about this in a few minutes, you know, how to use technology to upskill your purpose in life, you know, to go for your moonshots. You know, the analogy I like to use is, you know, how do you create a Star Trek future versus a WALL-E or a Mad Max future?
Yeah. Well, I think, again, you know, these are deep questions, but I think my hope is the Elons of the world that, you know, we've got a chance to be able to chat with and you're good friends with, and some of our friends at Google and some of those very individuals you're talking about. I think the gentleman at Anthropic has even more association to some of this, is to say, look, we have to do two things. We got to retool people for this, but we got to retool the psychology. And as you know, we did that study at Stanford on, you know, when in the middle of COVID, they came to me and said, you've gotten these unbelievable results for two of their professors who came to a Date with Destiny, a 6-day program. And what do? They reorganized, I didn't tell them how, their value system. Well, when you change your value system, you change what you notice, what you appreciate. If your number one value in life is security and the bottom of your list is adventure, when you walk in that seminar room, you know where all the exits are. If your number one value is adventure, you don't even know what door you came in. You don't care, right? Your predictive process, just like AI, literally is rewired in that process. So we need to teach people how to rewire themselves, and we've proven it. The Stanford study, you know, I asked them in advance. You said they want to do it on depression. And I said, you know, tell me what the meta-studies show about current treatments for depression. And blew my mind. 60% of the people that go in for therapy or drugs or the combination thereof make zero improvement on their depression. 60%, that's the meta-studies. 40% improve, but on average, they improve half as much, or 50% less depressed. Now, some get well, but very few. Most stay on these drugs. And I said, man, you should be able to get that result, you know, with a placebo. And I said, so what's the best study you've ever done? It was done at Johns Hopkins about 8 years ago now. For a month, they gave people depressed the psilocybin, magic mushrooms, and cognitive therapy for a month. I said, well, that much biochemical change, you must have got a change. They said it was the most successful in history. They got 56% of the people 6 weeks later had no symptoms, which is pretty unbelievable compared to anything else. I said, I know this sounds like, I'm exaggerating or, there's ego involved. I'm not. We've just done this enough. I know the rewiring process. We will trounce those numbers. So you set it up the same way. And when they did the study, after 6 weeks, 93% of the people had no symptoms whatsoever. And the 7% had improved. But more importantly, 17% of the people in the study came in with suicidal ideation. When they left, none did. This is just reorganizing, retooling, right? The best part was a year later with no interaction from me, their negative emotions dropped 72% overall, positive emotions up 51%. Now, why am I telling you that? If you have the best Ferrari in the world, let's call AI your Ferrari, right? It can empower you to do all amazing things at speed and amazing. But you got to think about what the new environment is you're driving that Ferrari in. If you're going to the, Baja race, Baja 1000, and you try to drive that beautiful Ferrari, it's going to go nowhere. If you go to the Dakar race, 9,300 miles in the Sahara Desert, and you don't retool, you're going to die out there. And so I think we've got to retool the thinking processes, the emotions, and we've proven we can do it. So I think with people, these types of things now can be done at scale, as you know. Like I'm doing my seminar, at the end of this month, I do one once a year for free for people all over the world. I've done it since COVID, right? And it's we call it the Time to Rise Summit. It's time to take your life to the next level. We offer it for free. We had 1.3 million people last year join us from every country on the face of the earth. And every night I didn't do it for 2 hours. I did it literally for 3 days, 3.5 hours a day. And you see these huge transformations that before I could only do in an audience of 15,000 people in a stadium. All that came, by the way, because when they shut down during COVID, this big problem, I had to adapt because I wanted to help people. It wasn't, I got 114 companies, but this is my mission. So I was like, okay, we'll move to Vegas. They shut down Vegas. We'll move to Texas. They shut down Texas. We'll do it in movie theaters. They shut down the movie theaters. So I built the studio and we started this process. And so now the seminar is no longer 15,000 people. A standard Unleash the Power Within event you go to has got between 40 and 60,000 people because we have people at the event live and people everywhere. So everything is to your advantage if you create these psychological shifts. That's what has to happen in people. And we need some players who want to help fund that. And I'm doing it for free where I can do it as much as I can. But the tools exist. It's not like we don't know what to do to rewire people. But if we do nothing, we're going to have problems. And not everyone's going to take advantage of that no matter what you do. And you're going to have to deal with that as a society still.
So first of all, we'll put the link to Time to Rise in the show notes and commend it again to everybody here. Tony, maybe the advantage is going to be AI Tony at scale. I mean, we're going to have AI delivering, mass issues in this disruption.
Well, not only me, but I'm in discussions right now with an organization that has some of the smartest AI people I think on the planet, and we're talking. They've already got it up and running. We're doing it in 50 languages. We're doing counseling. And that's just not I wouldn't recommend the average therapist. I'm not being disrespectful. I wouldn't recommend the average coach. In any industry, there are people that are exquisitely good, but they're it's hard to get to them or their schedule's full. So we're going to make this available literally worldwide for people to help them be able to manage. They could pop on an app and make it happen. Right now, it's done for free for people. At some point, there'll be a price point that'll be reasonable. And they haven't announced it yet, but they just the Federal Advisory Committee on Health and Human Services, they've had, I guess, I don't know, it was 2,000 people apply. I didn't apply, but there's 15 people on it, and they just selected me, and I'm going to be the person who's the mental health side. So it gives me a chance to really look at how I can have some influence on the governmental side to some of these tools, digital tools that can help us do that. Because I think digital tools are part of the answer. You can scale them. Right?
I think it's the only answer at scale. So when I look at your 6 human needs, right? Certainty and uncertainty, variety, significance, love, connection, growth, contribution. AI is hitting every one of those in a disruptive fashion, right? Just in terms of teenagers having relationships with AI girlfriends is going to disrupt, normal course of social development for individuals. I mean, the level of uncertainty that's going to hit people in their jobs, the level of certainty when I always know I can go get an answer and I have my AI that loves me and will always answer it. Significance.
Not only does it love you, but it always affirms you, even if you're being an idiot.
And
right?
tells you, your jokes are hilarious.
You're the best. You're so smart. That's such a great idea, right? It's crazy.
It is. So, it's going to screw with our 6 human needs. It
already is, as you said. There's more certainty for me to pick up my AI, and then, I don't know if you saw, but the latest statistic in Japan, they're talking about no one's having sex.
Yeah.
Right? They've moved completely out. They're burnt out by work, and then they fulfill themselves digitally in every way. They're, as you know, robots. They think have a soul, so they have a completely different frame. But I saw a statistic the other day. It blew my mind. Here in the United States right now, young men 25 to 33 years old, less than 1/3 have ever approached a woman to ask her out for a date physically.
Yeah, and that goes along with home ownership, and it's crazy. We're destroying sort of the existing social fabric in many ways, and the challenge is, I believe, we're just at the 5% of it all. Right, I don't even know it's 5. You and I, but we can't estimate something so big. But I think you're right. It's at the beginning of the beginning. But I do think there's a
a solution that's available to us on a larger scale too, if we can, at a fundamental level, just keep people to understand the story of their life. I mean, what is your life? It's a story. And if you think about, like, if you go to a movie, if you read a book, you know, there's usually 7 elements of a story. There's the fundamental way you know what the story's about is the main character has a desire, a driving desire. You know, if you go back like 30 years and you look at a terrible movie that almost everybody's seen, Schwarzenegger made this movie called True Lies. And in the beginning of this movie, you see the beginning of this guy and you realize he's a spy and he's going after the bad guys. And so you know what his driving desire is, that your desire determines the story. Is your desire to become one with God? Is your desire to make $1 billion? Is your desire to help the planet? Is your desire to save children? Is it write poetry? That starts your story. Then the next part of your story is you take a look at this and you start to say, everybody has a problem or a need or they wouldn't be after that desire. And what you'll see often is you as the person reading or watching the story, you can see the main characters missing courage, or they're not very kind, or they're not telling the truth. You know, that silly example I gave of Schwarzenegger, you know, he looks like a superhero and he goes home and you realize his family doesn't even know he's a spy. He lies to everybody about everything, right? And so he doesn't have courage at home. He doesn't have honesty. He doesn't have connection. And then the next part of the story is there's opponents always. There are 3 opponents. There's the external opponent, like those bad guys out here, but then there's the intimate opponent. In that movie, he thinks his wife is cheating on him and she's not, and so he has fights there. But then there's ultimately the fight within yourself, the internal opponent. And as you fight that, you usually come up with a plan to deal with these opponents. And if you want to make God laugh, tell her your plans, right? You have battles. But eventually, if you keep growing those battles, you have self-revelation. You have a moment when you realize, oh my God, it's not her, it's me. I'm not being honest. I'm not being courageous. I'm being courageous here, but not here where it matters. And that self-revelation leads to new actions, new character, and then you get to an equilibrium where life will never be the same again, or, you know, they're happily ever after. That elements of a story, if you can see where you are, where your desires are, what your current plan is, who you're battling with, that allows you to step out of reaction. But the ultimate step out is this. The oldest story of humanity, first of all, you need a really good opponent, right? If you look at, Silence of the Lambs and you see Anthony Hopkins with Jodie Foster, he's so brilliant, it makes her a bigger hero, right? But the hero's journey story, it's been taught 1,000,000 times. It's in every culture in the world. And we all know of Joseph Campbell. But I just want to remind people, if you can think of your life in terms of the hero's journey, whatever you're dealing with, technology change, job change, career change, like everyone is going to experience what the first step is in that hero's journey. Your life seems to be okay, and then something happens. And they call it the call to adventure. It doesn't feel like adventure when your house burns down. It doesn't feel like adventure when you're burglarized. It doesn't feel like your adventure when you lose your job or the government shuts you down with COVID or you find yourself in a position where someone says you have a tumor. But it is the beginning of an adventure if you don't give up. And so when we experience that extreme stress that people experience, we're all going to experience it. Doesn't matter how spiritual you are, how religious you are, how believer you are, doesn't matter how rich you are, doesn't matter how sincere you are. Everyone's going to experience it more than once. But what happens is most people try to not go on the call, like just ignore it. And it only gets worse, as you know. The old phrase is, if you're going through hell, keep going. If you push through those moments, the people that do, they get 3 things out of it. Number 1, they realize how strong they are. And all these other things you're worried about go away because you start realizing I am so much more than I thought I was. Second, you learn who your real friends are, not your Facebook friends or whoever you call them, right? The ones that are there when it's not going well. And third, you get almost an immunity to future challenges. I have a friend that was in Vietnam and was shot down as a pilot and spent 6 years in solitary confinement. And later on, I remember the IRS was coming after him and like, aren't you stressed? He's like, after the North Vietnamese, are you kidding me? No problem here. So the first step in that journey real fast, think of like Wizard of Oz. Dorothy's got this black and white, nice life. It's okay. She thinks the big deal is somebody wants to take her dog from her because the dog bit somebody, right? Little Toto. And then what happens? She avoids any real change. She just tries to run away. But then life comes and gets you. And when life comes to get you, it comes, when you try to refuse the call, it says, no, you're going on the journey. The tornado takes her. And she finds herself in a new world where there are new people. She makes some new alliances. She meets some new mentors who are going to help guide her. and she starts to go past the threshold where she can't go back. She's on this road. She's on this new journey. And on that journey, she goes through ordeals. She has to fight the dragon, the witch in this case, is the wicked witch of the East and the West. And she's going to get to the promised land where, Oz is going to give her everything. And she does all these fights and she goes through all these learnings and experiences and she becomes more. And when she gets there, she finds out this guy is not the person who's going to change my life. The answer is already inside of me. The Tin Man discovers that he already has a heart. The straw man understands he's got a brain. Yes, there's courage. He's demonstrated. It's not that you weren't fearful, that you did it anyway for the lion. And for her, it's tapping her feet and saying there's no place like home. Well, when you go through that cycle, when you slay the dragons, you become more and you have now something to give. You come home, a new person. And as soon as you think it's all over, it happens again, right? So when I lost my home, I've helped about $6 million I donated because I couldn't stand the pain I saw people in LA. I don't live in LA, because I saw people that get a 14-day pass, right? What are they going to do without a home? So I tried to help as many people as I could. But some of the people I helped individually and some of the people I got to talk to, I was like, I lost my home 20 years ago, burned to the ground. Everything I had was gone. My family was alive. That's what mattered. Everything else was gone. There was no place to store your pictures and your history in the cloud. And I said, but what it led to was a whole new world. I met new friends. I had to move to a new place. I met new mentors. And I have a dear friend who I just recently talked to who a year ago lost his home during that time. He's in the best shape he's ever been in. And he never would have made those changes without the call. So AI is the call. New technology is the call for us to become more. Again, to move from survival to spirit, to move from settling to something greater.
I agree with it all. I just want to go back to one point before we leave it, which is this does not exist throughout society today. This is a small percentage of the populace that have come to your programs, have learned your teachings, as I have. I've been both, I think, a close friend and a student of yours. And I think that the only way we're able to, Isaac Asimov's Foundation series, if you remember that book, foretold the collapse of the empire. And the whole story is around how do we shorten the dark age.
Yes.
Right. So I believe from everything I'm seeing, we're going to have a period of disruption.
Yes.
Is that disruption 3 to 5 years, 3 to 8 years, 3 to 10 years? I don't know. But the challenge has to be how do we ameliorate the issues? How do we shorten that time? And I think this whole, transformation of mindset, of purpose, of understanding this as opportunity and calling versus as devastation of your career is critically important. And for whoever is listening to the podcast, I think this is important to teach your kids, for you to internalize on your own. I think those who are in heads of corporations or government leaders, this conversation, this kind of planning needs to start today because it's going to take, 2 or 3 years to roll out. I think this has got to be in middle schools and high schools. I'm decimated by the fact that high schools today are avoiding the discussion or utilization of AI. This is coming, the way towards my 14-year-olds faster than ever before. We understand it. Understand that this is a quote from a dear friend who basically said that AI is not a hand grenade; it's a jetpack, right? Yeah. And that's how you should think about it. It's not something that's going to blow up your life. It's something that enables you at scale. So I think, Tony, the conversation is how do we do that, right? How do we get this deployed?
I think it's certainly not just what I'm teaching. I'm one of God only knows how many people that have these insights. But I think what it is having systems of scale. And so I think the education system is a huge part of that process. And that's why I'm personally investing in several approaches where it's a different form of teaching. There are right now private groups, but looking to find that ideal formula. As you know, there's many of them where AI is a part of the process and you can accelerate massively the traditional learning, but then kids are learning to have grit. Like when they got 5-year-olds doing a 5K on their trike and they don't think they can do it and they find out they can. Or a group of kids come together to learn how to, rent and create their own Airbnb experience. There are experiences of life that are coming, and there's a lot of it happening right now. But is it going to come together? Look, 3 to 5 years, probably we're going to have some very challenging times. To think that you're going to go and have every season be the same is absurd. We all think that how it is right now, if it's terrible, it's always going to be terrible. If it's good, it's always going to be good. But the 4 seasons of life happen. And so we will go through a tough summertime, or you could call it a tough winter time. But, some people freeze to death in winter. Other people learn to ski and snowboard and build a fire and be with their family. And what I'm suggesting is our discussions and many other discussions, not just the ones we're having, hopefully will stimulate more people to say, I'm going to choose to have this be a season I love and enjoy and grow from, not one I'm fearful of. And at the same time, I know not everyone will. I'm going to do everything I can to support individuals, organizations, or tools that can help people navigate this time period. Because on the other side of it, again, you'll have another springtime. You'll have a time where, there's times when people are optimistic, everybody believes everything's going to go great, and it goes for a period of time. But you got to remember, human beings are cyclical just like the seasons. Our emotions are. We go 15 years, 20 years if you study 1,000 years of Roman history or 500 years of Anglo-American history, which I've done pretty deeply. You see there's a period. There's that springtime where everybody's optimistic and it's great. But eventually, if you smile constantly, your face hurts. We need variety. So then you go through, or the universe, you go through a summer that's a little tough, a little hard. And then you go to the fall where everything's easy and you reap and the economy's great. And then you go through a great winter. Life is strengthening us, testing us, and then giving us a chance to grow. Testing us and a chance to grow. That cycle is not going to go away because technology enters our world. It doesn't mean because there's no work that there won't be seasons. Those seasons are part of nature. They're part of something larger than ourselves. And so what you want to do is figure out how do you take advantage of what season you're in? How do you help your family? And I think coming back to developing some new habits, getting your kids to take 10 or 15 minutes a day that was spent scrolling, and they're going to learn AI, just 10, 15 minutes a day. We do courses for people like that. Or I'm going to go do something in some area. I'm going to study nanotechnology. I'm going to study my own human psychology. Taking these little micro learning moments as a new habit will change people's lives because it'll get them to start recognizing patterns, using them, and eventually creating their own. And when you create your own, when you become a creator, all this fear disappears. It's not that you won't have challenging times. It's just nothing sustains you more than your own capacity, your own identity that says, I find a way always to take things to the next level. And the biggest thing missing, I think, for most human beings is they're looking to what they can get instead of what they can give. Mm-hmm. Every person I know, and you're one included, you talk about moonshots, right? It's like we found things we care about way more than ourselves, whether it be your kids, your family, your community. I mean, I got fed when I was 11 years old. It changed my life. We had no food, and now I've fed 62 billion meals. I did 1 billion on my own here in the U.S., and now we've done 62 billion towards our 100 billion meals. I learned how to scale, just like I did in business, my philanthropy. And that gives me more juice than anything else. You got to have something that you care about more than yourself, and then you have plenty of energy to face not just the challenges, but to surpass the challenges, because you'll have a compelling future. The one thing I'd say everyone needs, anyone can deal with the difficult today if they have a compelling tomorrow. So when we go through this process, we got to show people how to navigate it and show them how to create a compelling future out of it. And again, I think what AI is really going to do, if it does the things that, people are saying it's going to do, if it really does eliminate a lot of our survival instincts, if we have access to an AI doctor, an AI whatever, and we can create what we want in our own life on our own terms, then the bottom line is we still need to feel alive. We need to grow. The one thing that makes people feel alive is progress. Progress equals happiness. And if I'm growing and I'm stimulating that growth, it doesn't matter that economics are no longer the primary focus of it or survival. It's something else that will light me up. And we need to find that, what you call moonshot, what I call magnificent obsession. And when you find that, man, life is never the same again. And you and I both know that. We have the privilege of living those lives, but we develop that compelling future, and we need to help other people do the same.
Yeah, agreed. We call it a massive transformative purpose. What wakes you up in the morning, keeps you going through the day, that you obsess over. Let's talk about something that I wrote about in my upcoming book, We Are As Gods. Tony, we've talked about the Universe 25 experiment. Our dear mutual friend, Dr. Oz, first brought it to my attention. If listeners don't know what Universe 25 was, let me just do a quick recap. So there was a behavioral scientist named John Calhoun back in the late 60s, early 70s, and he created a mouse utopia. This was a large facility with all the food, water, nesting, no predators, no disease. It was basically a mouse paradise. It was his 25th time he'd done this, and he'd gotten the results consistently over time. So initially, he puts in 4 mating pairs, the population grows exponentially, but it reaches this threshold where social behaviors begin to break down. The mice withdraw, they're apathetic, they're hyper-aggressive, there's social dysfunction. The mice stop mating, parenting declines, the infant mortality spikes. And he describes these mice called the beautiful ones, that they groom themselves all day long and they lose any need for social behavior, reproduction. And then ultimately, the entire society of mice collapses, not from any external threat. And he talks about how the actual need for purpose and meaningful challenge matters more than almost anything else. And let's talk about that. You've addressed that in part, but just, the purposeful life being absolutely critical. And I think most of society, their purpose is putting food on the table and taking care of their kids or getting a Netflix account. And we're going to have to up-level that to a huge degree.
It's true, but one thing I'd just caution, though, is we're not mice.
Yeah.
Okay. And you've done enough medical studies to know that about 80% of the studies that come up with affect mice don't affect us the same way. But in this case, it's obvious. Mice do not have the creativity that we're at least aware of creating meaning, right? We have that capacity. We have the ability to use death as a counselor, something that creates maybe a drive for us to do something with our lives. We have the ability to create something from nothing. But let's be honest. When people talk about Darwin, you hear people talk about it's about the strongest, survive. And that's not what he said. He said
that's true.
It's not the strongest of the species that survives. It's not the most intelligent. It's those that are the most responsive to change, the most adaptable to it.
Yes.
So it's like our ability to adapt as a species is unmatched. That's why we dominate the planet. For better or worse, you can argue, but we dominate the planet. So I think having that sense of purpose, we've talked about it multiple times here, is critical. But I think there are many people that are going to take, you gave the example, I think, of what you call the Wall-E example, where I'm just going to be entertained by the world and just grow into a fat person that doesn't move and moves around in a scooter, versus, the Star Trek thing where I'm going on the adventure to uncover what things are. That's always been true of humanity. That has never changed, and I don't think it's going to change with this. There are going to be people that are going to use AI and all this technology to just be entertained and do nothing. Think about it. Right now, there are, from the ages of 25 to 35, male boys, young men, are living at home a larger percentage than any time in human history, including the Depression. And what do? The majority of them play video games, their mom does their laundry, and they order Uber Eats. And they live in that universe, that digital universe, where I don't know how much added value is happening for their life, much less anybody else. So there's always going to be those who maintain, and there's going to be those that create. There's always going to be people like yourself.
I think you made my point. I think you made the point about the Universe 25 experiment. There is that population who are just self-soothing because it's easy, and unless there's the intellectual sort of the groundwork placed early on in the child's life. I mean, one of the challenges, and I think about this as a parent, is like you're a perfect example. Hardship early in your life develops this need, right? I had that conversation with Elon. He was, in South Africa. It was a very dangerous place, and his goal was to escape there. And most successful people, not all, but most successful people had a sense of hardship early on. And if we're eliminating a lot of physical need hardships, you don't want to try and artificially create that. But again, I'm going back to how do you up-level people's sense of purpose in this regard?
What you have to awaken is hunger. What you're really talking about is hunger. Hardship can awaken hunger, but so can creativity. Sometimes your life doesn't change, then you meet somebody and they have this extraordinary life, something that you value, relationship-wise, business-wise, impact, lifestyle, whatever. And people look at them and go, man, I'm as smart as that guy is. What the hell's happening here? And they awaken to a new possibility. It doesn't have to be because something was taken from you. There are some people that are just driven to be the best at their life, and there wasn't necessarily a hardship. But I think more have been. That's absolutely true, because hunger is, I'm asked all the time, people say, you meet people all over the earth, you meet the most challenged, the most successful. What do the most successful people on earth have in common? And my first response in the early days was extraordinary intelligence, because I love wickedly smart people, you being one. I'm not floating you compliments. You know who you are. I'm a fairly smart guy myself. And so I love that. I love that interaction. But I found there are brilliantly smart people that can't fight their way out of a paper bag in real life. So the number one factor is hunger. The hunger to be more, do more, create more, give more. A hunger that never goes away. The hunger that you say, when you look at somebody, like Richard Branson, right? He still has it in his 70s that he did when he was 16 in that cemetery, starting up his little music company, right? So it's virgin at that time. He still has it today. Mm-hmm. As long as that hunger is alive, the world is going to be something that's going to be a beautiful place for you. And all these tools are tools you will use with your agency to create something extraordinary. But look, there's levels of consciousness. Just one more model for a second. There's a guy named Graves, Dr. Graves, who in the 60s, it looked like the world in the early 70s was coming apart. Young people were fighting older people, people who just looked in the short term as saying our society is being pulled apart into nothingness. Black and white, women versus men, all these issues. And he started studying the evolution of societies, and he developed what he called these 8 levels of consciousness. And anyone who hears about it, it's worth looking at, right? And what he did was, he calls it spiral dynamics. Now, I learned about it when I had the chance to work with Nelson Mandela, because when he was coming back after a quarter century of being locked up, he could have wanted to kill every white person around, and you wouldn't support it, but you'd understand, right? Because everything was taken from him unfairly. But instead, he got people to stop thinking white versus black by using these colors. He took these spiral dynamics into colors. Is that person a blue person or a green person or a red person? So let me give it to you for 10 seconds. There's 8 levels, real fast. Well, maybe you can put them on the screen later to show people. But level 1 is just survival or instinct. That's someone that's basically when you're a baby, or when you're really old and you don't have your faculties, you're basically stimulus response. Level 2 of consciousness, and again, consciousness means what do you care about? You don't need to make it more intellectual than that. At the second level, what they call purple, it's called tribal order. You care about things and you care about other people because they can affect your pain or pleasure. So you join a tribe. Now, you can be on a sports team and see people in tribal order who wear the same jock strap, who put on the same thing. They believe in the certain, rhythms that are going to give them the same results, certain gods, right? But in the tribal order area, there's someone who leads in. It's usually the storyteller, the shaman. We evolve, each of these stages evolve because we get to a point we can't handle our problems, and so our brain finally forces ourselves to look at life in a new way. The third level is called power gods. A power god they think of as red, and think of it as when you go red mad. A red person is a person who no longer just wants certainty anymore, they want significance. And so now a red person might be, the kings of the past who just took the peasants and you work for me, you live for me, you die for me, right? Power gods could be, you can find a power god today in some, bands, right? You can see out there, rock stars. They go and they can wreck the whole building and somebody pays all the money and they keep doing it. Everybody was a 2-year-old power god, right? No is the word you learn to say. So not everybody evolves, and I'm telling you these because we get to certain levels and they affect the way we look at life. The fourth level is called order in the absolute. This is blue. Why would you go from being the power god where you're in charge and you own everything and you have the power and you're the most significant one? Because at some point you think about death. Or you're getting older and a young power god's coming up, and so that evolved into, I need to figure out how I can be good forever. And blue became the idea of the religious approach, that if I can follow these universal rules, then I can have heaven forever. I can have this kingdom forever. I can have this beauty forever. But now I have to go from just thinking about my own certainty and my own significance to how do I affect other people? That was the value of religion. I have to look at that because it affects whether I'm going to be damned or not. And it became a new consciousness. Well, blue has its limits because after a while, people start to question, how could this one guy, whether it's the Pope or the general in the army, that's another blue environment, the rules are clear, you live by them or you're punished severely, right? Well, we evolved from that because people start saying, I don't buy it. I don't believe they have the whole answer. I want to try it on my own. And that evolved into what modern society is, at least in a good portion of America, which is what we call a striver-driver, an orange. That's a person who's like, no, I test the rules. I'm in business, or I'm a scientist. I'm going to test it and prove it works. And if it works, then it doesn't matter what you think. That's what science is. That's what basically business is. Then people get burnt out on that eventually because everything's a transaction. I'm doing this to prove that, to get this. And that can evolve to green, which is what most of us think of as socially conscious, where instead of everything is rule-driven, like we all have a voice. We all care. We think about the environment. We think about everything. But each level has its strengths and weaknesses. They all think they're the most important level. You know, if I ask people, which level are you? And some people, I'm socially conscious, I'm the top of the tree. Or I'm a business person, we employ all you greenies and make it possible for you. Or the reds go, I don't give a damn, you know, you screw around, I'll take your life. Or the blues go, I need to save you. They look at the same problems in different ways. But they all think they're superior when the truth is we need them all. It's like I've said to you, what's more important, the atom or the molecule? What would you say?
They are, one's a component of the other, and they're both critical. Yep.
The molecule or the cell, you get the game, right? The cell or the organism or the ecosystem or the planet or the earth. So you take out any chain and we all fall apart. So they're all invaluable. And the goal is to move up and down this. There is a seventh level called yellow, which is flex flow. Flex flow knows that, you know, we need to have some sense of hierarchy like orange and blue look at, but we also need to be able to flex like green can. And it allows you to look at things and say, not who's there because of the number of years, but who has the answers. And then the final level that he talks about is an awakened soul. That's where you feel everything. I feel humans. My wife feels animals. She can tell what's going on. And we all have moments of these levels. Now, why am I telling you this? Because right now, most of the world is in trouble is at level 2, 3, and 4, meaning purple, red power gods, you know, order in the absolute. It's this or it's that or I kill you type of thing. Modern society is more level 5, that orange striver-driver and some green. AI is going to take away, potentially, if it can do the things that you were talking about and that Elon's talking about, and bring this world of abundance, it literally takes us out of all these survival elements and calls us to go to this integrated view of life, this spiritual awakened view of life where we feel connected to everything and we can create things at that level. So there's going to be people that do that, and there's going to be people that are going to play their video games or the new version of that that's 3D, totally immersive, and we're not going to get away from that. But here's what I'll tell you about history. You can find history in 4 sentences. Good times create weak people. We have society back in the roaring 20s that if you were a kid, you were known as a flapper and you were irresponsible, and the whole world changed with technology overnight. Cars, radios, television, airplanes. It was unbelievable. And you thought, when I turn 19, 18, I'm going to get a car. You're born in 1910, let's say. And guess what? 1929 comes when you're 18 years old, 19 years old, and people are jumping out of buildings and people are standing in food lines, and you got the Dust Bowl in the middle of the country. And that generation of people who were so weak went through 10 years of depression from 19 to 29, and they got strong because they had to be. And then right when they thought they were going to have a break, World War II breaks out. Hitler looks like he's winning. And they go and fight the war and they come back. So they spend 15, 20 years to basically the time they're 35 years old living with unbelievable challenge. And that's the only way you build a muscle. So guess what? Easy times, the roaring 20s, created weak people. Weak people paid bad times. Bad times create strong people. And strong people create great times. And you can see that evolution in every 100 years and 20-year cycles. And today, you'll hear, you know, people that are, you know, X generation or even, you know, somebody older, you know, talk about, let's say, millennials today, or talk about, you know, Z generation, and they talk about how they're so spoiled and they got it so easy. And there's some truth to that. They haven't had to work anywhere near as much as other generations. But I guarantee you, we're going to face some real challenges coming up. And those are the new hero generations, the very generations people don't think of. They understand technology and they're going to learn how to grow and build muscle. And they're going to help make the world a better place, in my opinion. I think that's the next step.
Love
that's
it,
part
Tony.
of the evolution of consciousness that technology is going to call for us.
And speaking of conscious and brilliant individuals, I'm going to use this as a point to invite my moonshot mates in, if it's okay.
Oh, great. Wonderful.
Yeah, I would love that. Let's bring them in, and I'll introduce you to them. Tony, I want to introduce to you three of my best friends, my moonshot mates, I call them. Salim Ismail. Salim is the CEO of Exponential Organizations, was my co-founder with Ray at Singularity.
Yes.
Alex Wiesner-Gross is our resident genius in the world of AI and all things exponential. And Dave Blunden, my partner in my AI lab. Yes. Anyway, three amazing individuals. And I've had the chance to cover so many subjects with them. And I wanted to bring them in to have this conversation for the next 30 minutes or so.
Okay. I wish we were asking these questions of them so I could hear their answers this time.
And I welcome you to ask the questions of them as well.
All right. Well, some other time. We'll do a follow-up.
Who wants to jump in first? Salim?
Tony, I got to say, I've been teaching a class at MIT called Foundations of AI Ventures for the last 5 years and 2 semesters. So 10 classes, about 130 people in each class. So 1,300 people have heard me say, act like Tony Robbins. There's only one winning attitude in life. Because everyone comes in, they're a student, they think they want to be too cool for school, or they want to be no, there's only one way to act that actually works. If you have any desire to be an entrepreneur, to a builder, creator, just study every video of Tony and act exactly like that. It's the winning strategy. So thank you for being a role model for those 1,300 people.
Thank you.
Not to mention me, by the way.
Thank you. Very kind.
You can't be too kind to Tony.
I'm curious, as you're dealing with these kids today, what are the biggest questions that they're dealing with as they look at where the world's unfolding with technology?
Exactly what you guys have been talking about. One thing you touched on is Japan, but if you look at Korea, has the highest tech penetration in the world, highest smartphone penetration in the world. Samsung has record profits. Yep. By any technical metric, it should be the greatest place on earth. Highest suicide rate in the world, and 0.6 children per couple. So basically 0.6 children per couple. At that exponential decay rate, it'll disappear from the earth in just a couple generations. Yeah. And this is what they're thinking about, and it's good that they're thinking about it because they want to live in a happy, abundant, fruitful world with their friends, exactly the things that you guys were talking about. And AI is going to create this rate of change that is just beyond belief, and it doesn't correlate with happiness necessarily. It needs to be turned into happinose.
Well, we all know, we've met people, we all know people that have got more than enough economic resources, billions of dollars, and who are miserable. Those are phone calls that I often got to deal with and deal with people. So the abundance doesn't guarantee anything, but I do agree with you. I think, unfortunately, the level of engagement, what's the biggest problem in business today? It's engagement. We used to, it's the lowest level since COVID that we've ever had. They look at engagement, what's obvious, disengagement, which is, what we now call quiet quitting, where someone's doing the minimum, and then active disengagement, which is someone who's not only trying to do the minimum, but also trying to hurt the company. And we've had the biggest drop in engagement and the highest increase in active disengagement. And so it's like, what's happening is people are fulfilling themselves other ways. Like, why should I go to work? Why should I do this? So we have a cultural shift where technology is meeting some of those 6 needs. They're getting certainty easily. I don't have to do anything for the certainty. I don't have to grow. I don't have to push myself. I don't have to face my fears. Yeah. They get unlimited variety. They can feel significant by tearing somebody down with a couple keystrokes they don't even know. And they have no volatility, meaning there's no consequence for that. Yeah. And then they also can feel connected to other people the same way. But what they don't experience is the spiritual needs, which is to grow. And also, when we grow, have this thing where we have something to give. And that's where the emptiness is. That's why we have so many people out there talking about, their mental health. And the solution that we've been promoting since COVID, or at least pop culture has been promoting, has been this idea of you need to take care of yourself more. What's the term that everybody uses these days? Self-care, right? I don't need more self-care. But what you find is that people get weaker and weaker. Don't get me wrong, you need to take care of yourself. But I think the biggest challenge is without the push to build anything of any form of muscle, meaning a spiritual muscle, courage, faith, determination, right? Creativity. If there's no push for that, then we start to diminish. And I think what has to happen, I don't have the right answers by any stretch. I'm actually encouraged by countries like Australia, who some things I don't like they've done, like what they did during COVID, but I like the idea of some of these countries that are starting to say, hey, kids can't get on social media till they're 16, 17, 18. You only get so many hours. Unfortunately, you would expect that to be parents, but we no longer have family units the same way or any cohesion in the teaching. Today, so many people, I read a statistic the other day that said a third of families have someone in their family they don't talk to anymore. To me, that's insane. But we aren't teaching people that, look, life is about us sharing. We can have different points of view. It's if you have a different point of view than me, then I have to eliminate you. Or that words are violence. I mean, Chris Rock said to me, he goes, if people say words are violence, they've never had their face slapped the shit out of on national television, right? You know, it's like just bullshit. So we have these belief systems we poured into our younger generation that are actually harming them, and then we're giving them tools that addict them, and they're wondering why our society isn't flourishing. It's kind of like, think about it this way. When we have a bunch of people that are financially not doing well, we put them together in a project. How are they ever going to get better when there's no examples of success there? We take a bunch of people that are crazy and put them in a mental institution and wonder why they don't get better. The way we get better is by different examples and offerings. And so we need to go full force, in my opinion, as business owners, as entrepreneurs, as leaders, as people in politics, where we start to say, what are the 2 or 3 things that can make the biggest difference? Part of that's got to be in the educational system, as we've already talked about. But I think another part of that is just what is the discourse? What is the narrative about what's going to give you a fulfilled life? Because most people have fallen into making a living. They've been disappointed by so many things. They're no longer designing their life, and now they're in that maintaining mode, and they're stressed all the time. During COVID, there was a woman in the New York Times who did an article with all these people are trying to do less and less so they'd be less stressed. And she taught a 9-week basic time management course. I mean, really basic. And what she found was that their life satisfaction scores, their work level went up 3 times, and their life satisfaction scores went up 4x. Just from learning how to get more out of their life.
That is one of the greatest sources of hope.
We don't teach anybody, we don't teach young people any of these skills, and they wonder why they wind up addicted to, some devices that are designed to addict them. You
can see how this could go horribly wrong and how it could be really, really good, and exactly what you said, because AI could be like junk food, emotional junk food. You just get addicted to the easy path, and before you know it, you're emotionally fat. Or it could go the other direction where you commit that I want to be a better person, and you just tell the AI, hold me accountable.
Yes.
And then it becomes like a life coach. It keeps you on track. It encourages you. It motivates you. And it really comes down to whether the people behind it are motivated by improving the world or motivated by squeezing money out of you, or some other negative motivation. And it's all just
and what's your bet on which one's the driving force for the majority?
Yeah. Well, I think, you have such a huge following of highly motivated people or people who want to be highly motivated. If there's a good option out there, and we'll keep track of it, ourselves on this pod, but if there's a good option out there, you can point a lot of people toward it, and it can make a huge impact on the world.
Anything you know of that nature, I hope you guys will fill me in. You've got access to me through Peter in 2 seconds flat. I want to make sure that we get as much out there as possible. And like I said, I've been put on the Federal Advisory Committee for Health and Human Services, and some of that on mental health, that should give me another avenue of having deeper discussions, because, I know a lot of people in that position. Bobby Kennedy's a friend of mine. Obviously, Dr. Oz is a friend of mine. Marty is a good friend of mine. So we've got a lot of brilliant people in that area on the health side, and I think you can attack it from the mental health side as one part of it. But I think we got also, you see all these kids that think communism is the answer, right? I don't know if the number's accurate, but I heard that, read someplace that 80% of the female vote of young people went to Mondani, right? It's like, okay, here's the solution, because it sounds so nice. I'm old enough, I went, and actually when it was still the Soviet Union, I was invited over because of the work I was doing with firewalking and things of that nature. So I went with a group of scientists, and I traveled the country, and I got to see pure communism right up front. And we traveled on this train literally from Moscow to Siberia and back over a period of 2 weeks. And we were on a train where everybody's supposed to be equal, and everybody there is having caviar and everything else. And every train stop in every town, there is a giant center area, and you'd see people wrapped in the freezing cold, 3/4 of a mile around, waiting in line to get a quart of milk and half a loaf of bread. I mean, and these people are having caviar. It turned me into a capitalist. I didn't know what a capitalist was, but when I left there, I was so pissed. But kids today have no clue. They just think it means more good stuff. And it's, you know, some of these kids had a helicopter parent that took care of them their whole life. And so they think the government should be that. They don't know the cost of what that's going to be. And unless we keep putting out the truth, and also we find solutions to help them through this unique time, then I think we're in for a rough patch here for a period of time.
Yeah, isn't it amazing how much faith they put in the government, though? Like as if it's there. Like somebody up there must be studying and understanding all of this. I mean, you are the government now, right? That's Tony. You're the guy. Actually, you should tell us more about that commission, because that's going to be hugely important in this transition year.
Yes.
What is that all about?
Well, they just formed it, and they haven't even announced it all yet, but there's 15 of us on the council. I'm the mental health one. So I'm going to be sitting down with them, and we're looking at what's the game plan for maximizing. But the first focus is tapping into digital technology to improve the quality of people's lives. So I'm sure you know they're already going to invest now for people, you know, on Medicare and so forth, so they can wear like their whoops and measure what's really going on with people. They want people to have that. But then there's the digital mental health side that can help people, like AI counselors. I mean, as I said, I'm working with a company right now. We're producing some results that even blow my mind, where it isn't an average person. It's the best of the best. They've read every single psychological book there is, but then we can guide them through some of the latest tools, because some of that technology is 100 years old. It'd be like, you wouldn't use a phone from 10 years ago. Why would you even consider that? Technology from 100 years ago related to our mind, but that's traditionally what we do in traditional psychology. So there are tools available.
That is one of the most powerful.
The digital world can help us scale that. That's where we can make a difference.
You think about all the positions you could have in the entire world right now, and what's one of the most powerful and important ones? I mean, that role as the person in charge of health with AI federally at the national level, you can't pick anything more critical to the success of the country and to the world,
I'm not in
really.
Control of it. I'm an advisor. I don't want to play it bigger than it is.
Okay.
But it does put me in a position to be able to take the stuff that I learned from you guys and other people and say, bring it to the table for discussion. And I think we have an administration here that, you know, whether you like the administration or not, the one thing they are is aggressively trying to do the most they can to get people to be healthy again, to get poisons out of foods, and to operate in ways that could help people have an emotional base that is different than we have right now. We have the largest mental health issues that we've heard about, and God only knows when. You've seen what suicide rates have been and so forth. Post-COVID, we've gotten weaker, and we've got to become stronger.
Well, I keep telling everyone around the schools all hate the administration because they're cutting funding, whatever. I tell everyone, look, I don't care whether you like the administration or not. This is the only one that matters in the AI era. We're only 1 year into it, guys. There's 3 more years to go. Look at the rate of AI change. So either get comfortable with the administration, but if you wait it out, it's over. So make
4
your
years
peace
from
with
now,
it.
it's going to be a different world.
Yeah.
Tony, when you talk to young people, what are the best techniques you've found that awaken that hunger in them? What are the techniques and the hacks that you've found?
I find telling them, like, I never used to tell my story of what actually my youth was like. My mother was the most influential person in my life, and God rest her soul, I wouldn't be who I am without her. But she also mixed alcohol with prescription drugs, and when that happened, she was extremely violent. And so I remember the first time I was with this group of kids, and they all were had single mothers from minority families, majority. And I was up there speaking to them initially, and I could just read their minds. This tall, rich guy, white guy, what the hell? And so first time in my life, I told the whole story. I was never derogatory. My mom has passed at this stage, but I just told them the burning truth. I had them all crying their eyes out by the time I was done. So then they understood that, hey, we have the same background element. And then I told them, your biography is not your destiny. It doesn't matter where you've come from. It's the choices you make now. And so I got credibility by entering their world in a way that was absolutely as real and raw as possible. And I used, very direct language that they understood at that stage. I entered their world. And so I find it's really critical to try to see who you're dealing with, no matter where you are in the world, right? If I'm going to speak in China, I have to understand the cultural rules there, or I'm not going to be able to reach people appropriately. I know the human needs are the same, but I got to still make it through those rules. So I find with kids, if they can see that this is real, because, we live in a world where everybody talks about the wealth gap. Well, a big part of the wealth gap is there's about a dozen people that are getting $100 billion, $200 billion, $300 billion. That it's very different than the mean, as we know. And so when you're on social media, you used to compare yourself to the neighbor, right? Now you compare yourself to billionaires. Was what 3,000 of them roughly in the world? I mean, no, that'll make you feel like you're behind. It's literally what made Russia change. People started to see what's happening in the West and said, I wanted that. But now we're creating a level of discomfort and unfairness to people because they're having an expectation that they should be the winners of the lottery, and not everybody is going to be, even if you're smart and even if you're incredibly skilled. So I think it's getting it real and showing there's still a path, because so many kids think there's no path to having a home, to no path to having, and I tell them, look, when I bought my first home, I was 18 years old, it was 2008, and interest rates at that point were, 16%. It's like, they look at me like, are you crazy? It's like people are complaining about 7%, 6%. So I think it's entering their world, showing them what's real, and demonstrating it still can be done, and helping them build a compelling future. To me, that's the most important part.
I'm a Tony AI subscriber, by the way, so I've really been enjoying getting your
I'm glad to hear that. That's great.
Yeah. Although I've got a slight beef with you. Back in Singularity University, you'd brought your platinum group, and I moderated the couple of days, and then you took me aside afterwards, and you said, I need a couple of minutes with you. And you said, there's a group of people that know the world is changing dramatically. I call that the TED crowd, you said. There's a subset of that group, you said, that knows how deep and broad that changes, which is kind of like your Singularity people. But then there's the number of people that know what to do about it. I would put that group on one hand. And you said, Salim, you're one of them. Don't stop if you have any inclination on this stuff. And that's been bugging me ever since. So thanks a lot, pal.
It's acknowledging who you are.
Appreciate it, but dang.
Alex, why'd you pop in?
Alex, you want to say something brilliant?
Pressure's on.
By the way, Alex has 3 degrees from MIT in 4 years, the 3 hardest you can get, and
God.
his PhD from Harvard. So it was actually 3 + 1. Anyway, sorry.
Congratulations on your new advisory position. And I should say, as a preliminary matter, I don't have any financial interest in your budding empire, but congratulations nonetheless. I did have a question based on your anecdote about the Soviet Union. So there are millions, as I understand it, who look to you for insight in terms of gaining financial freedom, thinking about retirement, and yet, in the next 10 years, there are many, myself included, who think that advances in AI are going to transform the way finance is done, perhaps beyond recognition. First question, would you be interested in leading sort of a Manhattan Project for the global economy to prepare people for a new world, a new economic world where perhaps money as we know it is obsolete and scarcity as we know it has turned to abundance?
Well, I don't know if I'm qualified to be the leader, but I'd love to be a supporter of it in any way I could be, of course. And one thing I try to get across to young people also, because this is coming, is besides the obvious of what they can do now and what they can do today and what they have control over is, I remember when I was 18 years old, I had a teacher named Jim Rohn. He was a personal development and kind of a business philosopher. And, I had 4 different fathers. And one of the reasons I've fed 1 billion people in the US and 63 billion overseas is because I wasn't fed. But I was on Thanksgiving when I was 11. Somebody delivered food for our family when we had no food. We had crackers and peanut butter, but we didn't have a meal. And the reason I tell you that is when I look at those experiences and I say, how can I help someone understand, why is it some school teacher in those days, I went to my teacher and I said, how come the school teacher, I told him, look, I had 4 fathers. They were all good men. We were always broke. We were always worried where the next meal was going to come from. And I said, I'm only 17 at the time. And I said, and my current father is going through it right now. And I said, he's a good man. And I said, a school teacher, I think in those days was making like $35,000. And then you see this hedge fund guy made $1 billion last year. I said, I don't understand this. This doesn't seem fair. And he said something I'll never forget, and it shaped my whole life. He said, Tony, you are right. We are all equal as souls on this planet, but we're not equal in the marketplace. And I said, what does that mean? He said, was it possible for someone to earn twice as much money in the same time, 4 times as much money, 10 times, 100 times? I said, well, obviously there are people that do it. I said, how? He goes, that's the answer. The how is you have to become more valuable. If you go to work at McDonald's and you get minimum pay, it's not designed to be a great job. It's a first job. It's not designed to be your whole career. And the reason is anyone can learn to do that job in a few hours max. Today, even faster. There'll be machines that are doing it in some of these places, right? He said, so it's not worth much. Your job is to learn to do more for others than anybody else in the marketplace. If you become more valuable in your skills, your insights, your tools, and you have more you can give, and it's what people need, there will be no limit. So I think in any change of society that we talk about where maybe economics are not as primary, I think there's still the idea that we all need to find what's the added value that we're bringing to the marketplace, so to speak. When I say marketplace, to our children, to our family, to our community. In other words, nobody feels valuable because you just tell them they are. When people talk about self-esteem, I hate this term, it's so overused. People say, well, I don't have any self-esteem because when I was growing up, my parents said this and that to me. Well, someone can tell you're the most beautiful person, you're the smartest child on the planet, you're brilliant, and you can not believe it. You're pretty and not believe it. You can have someone tell you you're a piece of crap, and some part of you can say, I'll show you, right? Your self-esteem has nothing to do with what other people have said to you. Your self-esteem is based on only one thing, esteem for yourself, and that is earned. When you get yourself to do something that's incredibly difficult, and by doing it, it not only benefits you but others, there's an explosion in self-esteem. And I think whatever happens in the world, the idea that I'm here to bring something to life, that life is calling me to bring something, even if there's no economics involved, is the most important element to have a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning, and therefore a healthy, a vital, and a joyful and meaningful life.
A follow-up question, if I may, just on the notion of scarcity, but also you've clearly impacted so many millions of people with your way of thinking in terms of finance, in terms of life outcomes. I have to ask you the contrarian question, which is, what information do you still have in your mind that you haven't already shared with the world? What viewpoint do you have that is so wildly shocking and not evenly distributed that if you told me what it is now, it would make national or international news? What secrets do you have left?
First of all, I'm not that significant. I'm just one guy trying to help as many people as I can. I don't pretend to be God or have these giant insights.
So understated.
I feel very lucky and sincerely to be in the presence of people with the greatest minds of all of you. No bullshit to that. So I honor you and respect you. But I don't know. I think there's an ongoing evolution in me, as I'm sure there is in you, right? I mean, if you and I stopped our growth and stopped our insights, and so how many of the insights that I have around intimate relationship or around how to scale a business or around what you can do with your physical body with some of the breakthroughs that are there, those are ongoingly growing. Peter and I wrote that book, just 2 years ago, Peter, was it? Maybe 3?
Life Force, 3 years ago now.
Life Force. And, we as I usually do, we wrote a little tiny book with like 700 pages, on the thing. And we use Bible paper so it doesn't look too big. But I wanted to hit every angle, and I had the right partner with Peter, right? We could dig into everything there. So, but even after that was a couple of years ago, there's so many new things Peter and I do. So we have businesses where those things can happen. So I don't know if there's any one thing in one area. I just say I'm going to continue to evolve, and then as I do, try to use as many vehicles as possible to share things to people that are interested. I'm not the right style for everybody. I'm quite passionate, intense, talk 100 miles a minute. That's not the right style for people. I may not come in the right package. But what I'm more interested in is platforms where multiple voices can make that happen, not just me. And that's why I'm interested, for example, in AI interventions. Yes, I have an AI, and yes, we have AI interventions, but having you be able to pick a style that's supportive or more challenging, or a man or a woman, all those choices in your language that you can access 24/7 when the problem's happening, with someone at the level of skill that I would have or someone else you would respect or we would respect together. To me, that's where it gets exciting. So I think it's more the distribution of those distinctions into vehicles where people can have one-to-one relationships at scale. So that's what I try to do with feeding people, take it to scale. When I'm fortunate enough to have my own private plane. It uses a lot of fuel. So I was like, okay, what's my fuel burn? How much am I using? And I found out I needed, 3,000 trees. So I planted 100 million trees, set a goal, and I did it in 4 years, million? Right? It's like, so in everything I do, I'm looking to scale it. When my wife and I, witness some friends whose child was abducted and trafficked, and it was the most horrific thing you can imagine. So, we stepped in, and now in the last 7 years, we've, helped free more than 70,000 kids in that category. So it's like scale to me is what I'm looking to do. Take any insight we can, scale it. But I don't pretend to have all the answers or even the right answers. I have some answers for some people that are interested in that style.
One more question, if I may, along those lines, Tony. So scaling. If you had the opportunity to upload your mind into the cloud and scale yourself indefinitely, say sometime in the next 10 years, would you take it?
100%. 100%. Why would you not? By the way, I'm not suggesting that everything I'm going to load there is going to be valuable. There's a lot of bullshit in there. You probably say it doesn't work for me, but you would allow people to select what is most valuable for them on a major scale. And quite frankly, I believe that possibility, or at least a version of what you described, will happen in the next 3 to 10 years. I think it will. Whether I can put that in and then this vehicle goes away and my consciousness continues, like Ray Kurzweil talks about, who's a dear friend of ours. I love him to death. I don't know if that's the same thing. I don't know if, I think there's something called spirit that I believe in. I could be dead wrong. You could say it's just X's and O's and information and data, but I don't know. I don't know if that's there. But to make a contribution beyond my lifetime is my goal already. I don't have any sense of bullshit self-importance like I'm going to be a historic figure or something. But while I'm here, I want to help and touch as many lives as I can, and I want to leave as much as I can for my family and my grandchildren and children and for anybody else that's interested that finds value in it.
Yeah, and if you had the opportunity, since so much of what I think you talk about is willpower and everything in connection with that, if you had the power in connection with uploading or a high bandwidth brain-computer interface or some other AI assistant to gain conscious control over your dopamine response, would you exercise that?
It's a great question. I have never thought about that. I think if I trusted myself to be judicious with it, yes. I think otherwise, it's just like every other technology. You can turn technology into a drug. Most people turn problems into a drug. If you think about it, I don't think the biggest drug on the planet is not cocaine. It's not pot. It's not heroin. It's problems. Because the deepest fear everybody has is they're not enough. I've never met anybody who had some context didn't feel like they weren't rich enough, smart enough, lovely enough, humorous enough, funny enough, smart enough, whatever it would be for someone they care about. You may not feel it now, but we all feel it at some point. And then so that feeling of not enough leads to feeling like you won't be loved. And I think those two fears are so strong in human beings that they dominate people. Most people create a story about why they're not where they want to be, and it becomes like the wall that protects them, but the wall that protects them imprisons them. And so I look at these things and say, I don't want to become a dopamine machine where I'm just making myself feel good. I think one of the secrets to life, in my opinion, is like most people don't win the game of life because, number one, they don't know what the goal of the game is. They've never decided what their purpose is, right? So if you don't know the goal of the game, how are you going to win? The second problem that they have is they don't know what the goal of the game is, but they got lots of rules. I can't do this. I must do that. And the third problem is their rules are often in conflict. They were taught, look before you leap. They were also taught, he who hesitates lost. So, how do I make a decision, right? Another one is you got to deal with other human beings that have different rules, right? If you're going to succeed in this life. And so you got to deal with that. Another one is most people take things so heavy. The people that I think succeed in life, they know the goal of the game, at least for now, the purpose of what they're about. They have decided there are some rules that they're going to do. Something else is different is, and this relates to your dopamine questions, why I was triggered to tell you this, is in life, you can do the right thing and get pain. And you can do the wrong thing and get pleasure. So only a smart person learns to train themselves to give myself pleasure when I really do what I believe is well, not what everybody else gives me accolades for, like AIs, like these AIs today, they're absurd. They make you like you're the greatest person in the world no matter what you say. That's the stupidest thing in the world. And if I do something that I know is wrong, even if the world doesn't punish me, I give myself that hit. And so my only concern with the dopamine side would be if it got abused. Now, I don't think I'd abuse it, but I'd have to think that one through because it would certainly be tempting once you're in it.
I got this from my son for Christmas, actually. It's the Claude, you're absolutely right sticker. It's just a little reminder that, you can't fall into that AI trap.
It's a total sycophant process, and that's why I'm reading about these women that are all having relationships now because they're affirmed constantly. Their AI listens to them, right?
Yeah.
And affirms them continuously, and what do I need a man for, right?
Yes.
That's part of what we're dealing with here.
Salim, why don't you jump in?
That's the slippery slope.
Tony, you've been coaching millions of people over decades, right? After kind of looking back over that time, are you more optimistic about the world or less in the transformation you've seen at a zeitgeist level? Because there's almost nobody in the world that can comment on this and the trajectories you've seen over those decades.
Well, it's my 49th year. I'm just beginning. It's almost 50 years. It blows my mind. Of course, I started when I was 3, you understand, right? I am more optimistic, but I'm, Peter and I are dear friends and partners in several businesses, and I'm not as optimistic as Peter is about things sometimes. We tease back and forth. But I think, here's what I think about optimism. I think I'm realistic. Like, I don't think you should go to your garden and chant, there's no weeds, there's no weeds, there's no weeds. And when there are weeds are there, I've got to see the weeds and rip them out, right? So I don't think this is a smooth transition to the future. I think, as I've already said, I think there's going to be some bumpy parts of the road, but that's part of our own growth, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, as a society. But I am more optimistic, and I think optimism is the right route. It's like, I don't know if you learned Optimism years ago. I'm sure you did, Selig's book. But, the great thing I found out of that book was he talked about how pessimists are always more accurate about their performance than optimists. They always are much more accurate in the description of how they perform. Optimists always think they perform better than they have. But because the optimist thinks they've done better, they do it again and again.
And they push themselves.
And they keep going, and so they tend to succeed. So I think if you had to pick one, you got to be optimistic. And then secondly, I would say, here's what I am optimistic about. I'm optimistic as I look at not just the last 50 years, but when I study 1,000 years of Roman history or 500 years of Anglo-American history, and I see the cycles. And I'm very optimistic that the kids of today, and I'm calling people kids that are in their 40s, which probably might be insulting to them. It's not meant to be. I'm just 66 in a few weeks here, so I feel a little differently about it now. But those, in other words, millennials and Z, I think they're the next heroes of our society. I'm extremely optimistic that the things we're going to face, they are going to be the ones that actually step up and help us through that transition in an effective way. Just as, going back just one century, let's say, the flappers became, the greatest American generation. We call them the Great Generation. So they're going to face significant challenges, and I think they're going to grow as a result, and I think we're going to have a new springtime. But we're not going to get to spring without going through winter. And people think we're in winter right now. I would argue we're in winter, but we're not in the strongest part of winter. The strongest part of winter is when we get the kind of technological jolt that happens if we've got a serious cyber war with China. We have a cyber war already, obviously. Some certain things that can push us to have to look at things in a different way. I think those things are coming, and technology is going to push those. And I think internally, these job losses that are already starting to occur, that can become part of that push as well. So there's a long answer to say, in my 50 years of service, almost 49, I am more confident today because I've seen long-term patterns, not just short-term. And I'm also, because what's available today to the average human being, think about it. We live the greatest pharaohs in the world. What would they have given to be able to fly from one part of the world to another in a few hours that we bitch about when it takes an extra hour or two? What would they do for an actual bathroom? Better yet, could they spend $100 million for a movie to entertain them for 2 hours and have people backed up around the line where we're paying $10 for 100 movies available right there on your TV set? People's quality of life today is greater than the pharaohs, and it's going to become even greater. The question is, can we get our human psychology to keep up with the technological advances? That's the good news here that we'll face.
The good news here, Tony, is that the same technology that's giving us these problems allows us to scale the solutions.
That's right.
And we just need to get more people focused on solutions. So we've got about 5 minutes left. Maybe a last question from you, Alex?
Yeah. I'd be curious maybe to try one more time, Tony, on the contrarian question, which is, what belief do you have that you think no one else in the world does?
I just don't think I'm that unique. I appreciate the question, but I think multiple people I'll give you a core belief that I have that not everybody has. It's a core belief. And I developed this belief maybe out of necessity. I don't know how you want to look at it, but I really believe that life is always happening for us, not to us, even though it looks like it's happening to us. And I believe that because I've lived long enough, and I'm sure you have as well. Alex, if you look back at your life, or any of you, how many of you have had an experience in your life 5, 10, 15 years ago or more that when it was happening, felt like the worst thing that happened in your life? You'd never want to go through it again. You never want anybody you care about to go through with it. But 5, 10, 15 years later, with the power of perspective, you look back and go, man, I see the universe or God's value in that made me so much stronger, or made me care more, or it made me more sensitive to this. I haven't been able to find anything that I couldn't find that with when I gave it my focus. But of course, if you think life's happening to you, that's all you find. And I think that frees me up from this punishment cycle that people have for themselves, or they think God is doing to them, or the universe, or the world. It frees me from the, somebody is, pushing me down and the system's against me. It frees me from all that because I look at it all as a worthy opponent. All that is a worthy opponent. It's designed so that I become more, so that I can give more, so my life has more meaning while I'm here and hopefully when I'm gone.
Tell me about the Time to Rise event coming up, and how do people find out about it? I did this since COVID. It's like people were trapped at home, and I was like, how do we help people in the middle of all this? And I said, I'm going to do a seminar. I was going to do 2 hours, 3 hours. I said, no, let's do 3 days. Let's do about 2.5, 3 hours a day. Make it enough that it doesn't take their whole day, but it's like going to a great movie, but your life transforms. And what we do is we'll have over 1 million people every year from virtually every country in the world. And it's coming up, I believe it's January 29th through the 31st. And it's 2 p.m. Eastern, but we have people joining from all over the earth. And what we do is we walk people through the process of making some of these changes. And at night, they're part of a community of 1 million or more people, literally all over the earth. And people put up videos showing the assignment I gave them and how they change. And you see this community over 3 days come together and transform. So there's zero charge for it. It's not partially free. It's totally free. And all they got to do is go to Time to Rise Summit, timetorisesummit.com. and register, and they can join us. And if they're doing it at home, they can do it with their family. If they're doing it at the office, they might want to, it's fun to do with some of your friends. It's a very fun process, but it'll show you how to increase your energy. It'll show you how to get clear what you really want. It'll show you how to deal with the obstacles. It'll show you how to retool yourself in the areas that matter most, your body, your emotion, your relationships, your finances, just in 3 days. And it gives people momentum. Instead of the first of the year, by the time we do this, we always do this the third week because people set their New Year's resolutions, those that actually even do it anymore. And usually by that time, they've already broken them. And resolutions don't do it. You need a plan and a strategy, and you need a community to support you. And so I've made it so you don't have to travel. You don't have any cost. It's just our way of trying to see how we can help 1 million or more people each year. And I'm excited to do it. So if you go to timetorisesummit.com, and I'll see you on January 29th through 31st, and love to serve anybody who comes. I love you, brother. Thank you for all that you do in the world. Just grateful, and can't wait for Tony AI to scale. I think it's one of the most important conversations we had here.
Well, and Peter AI and all of you, and I really mean it sincerely. You guys are doing amazing work, and I love how your podcast has grown like crazy. I know friends over in other countries that watch you guys religiously. So thank you for all your contributing. I appreciate it so much.
Grateful. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Salim.
Well, it's
Dave.
been a pleasure.
Thank you. Love you all.
Buddy.
If you made it to the end of this episode, which you obviously did, I consider you a moonshot mate. Every week, my moonshot mates and I spend a lot of energy and time to really deliver you the news that matters. If you're a subscriber, thank you. If you're not a subscriber yet, please consider subscribing so you get the news as it comes out. I also want to invite you to join me on my weekly newsletter called Metatrends. I have a research team. You may not know this, but we spend the entire week looking at the metatrends that are impacting your family, your company, your industry, your nation. And I put this into a 2-minute read every week. If you'd like to get access to the Metatrends newsletter every week, go to Diamandis.com/Metatrends. That's Diamandis.com/Metatrends. Thank you again for joining us today. It's a blast for us to put this together every week.